You're listening to a Monster Kid podcast.
Welcome to A Dingo Ate My Movie, a podcast that celebrates the weird and wonderful Australian genre movies from the 70s, 80s and beyond. I'm your host Pete, and today I'm joined by Brandon to discuss Richard Franklin's Roadgames from 1981. Hi Brandon, how you doing, mate?
I'm doing well. How are you, Pete?
I'm really good. It's great having you on again. I think we had you on back in the first real episode when we did Man from Hong Kong. That seems like a long time ago now. It was about 6-7 months ago now.
Yeah.
So it's great to have you back.
Good to be back, yeah.
We really enjoyed this movie. I love this movie and have watched it, quite a bit. And over the years, watching it yesterday was great. Watching it a bit deeper, listening to commentary, stuff like that. It was really good. It's a fun movie, right?
Yeah, no, I had a great time with this one. I'd never heard of it until you suggested it, but I immediately picked this one up and a few others that you recommended. And I was like, yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun to talk about.
So let's just jump into the plot. So in this movie, Stacey Keach plays an American truck driver traveling between Victoria and Western Australia. He picks up a hitchhiker named Hitch, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, and together they play a cat and mouse game with a vicious serial killer. So this movie is directed by Richard Franklin, and very obviously you can see his Hitchcockian roots in this movie, right?
Oh, sure.
He's so into it. I mean, have you seen Patrick?
I haven't yet. No.
Okay, because Patrick's exactly like the same in regards to the whole Hitchcock feel and everything like that. It was written by Everett DeRoche. He was a screenwriter. So he also wrote Patrick, Razorback, Frog Dreaming, I think, which we're going to do a little bit later, and Long Weekend. So he's done a lot of movies in this whole Ozploitation genre. Vincent Monton was the director of photography. He also did Long Weekend. I thought the photography in this was great, as is Long Weekend. Really good. With the actors, we have Stacey Keach, played Pat Quid. I thought he was great. Loved him in this. Really good. Jamie Lee Curtis as Hitch. She's really good, but I think massively underutilized in this movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. She doesn't really have a substantial amount of screen time.
No, not at all. It's very interesting that she wasn't used much, but I don't know if you listen to the commentary. Richard Franklin mentioned that she wasn't the first choice, but it was only when the distributor, I think it was Avco Embassy at the time, came back and said, "Oh, look, we need some guarantee that it's gonna work. So we want you to have an American actress in the female lead." So he asked Jamie Lee Curtis because he'd been on the set of The Fog, and she said yes, and she came along. But he'd already written the part for somebody else, and it was like, not quite as involved. And he was saying that had he known he was going to have Jamie Lee Curtis in the movie, he would have given her a lot more screen time. So definitely underused. And then we have Grant Page, who played Smith or Jones, which I think is an interesting name. They keep calling him Smith or Jones. I don't know why. Did they ever explain why, or did you ever fill out why they call it?
I don't think so. I'm guessing that it comes from whenever whenever Quid and Hitch first start talking about, like, they're trying to figure out this killer's motivations and why he's doing what he's doing. And I think Quid suggests that we play a Smith or Jones game.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. But I'm not really sure if that means something else, or if that's a real thing, or if that's just something he made up.
Yeah, I was kind of like, is that really the name? And then when they were talking in the commentary and he kept mentioning and they kept calling him Smith or Jones, I was like, okay, that's his name. So, yeah, so Grant Page is probably much better known as a stuntman, right? So he did all the stunts in Man from Hong Kong, Death Cheaters, Mad Dog Morgan, Mad Max, stuff like that. So he's done lots of stuff and really good stuntman, but he's great in this show, in this movie. I think he's really quite fun. He's got a weird look about him in this movie. Sometimes his eyes look like they aren't there. It's quite strange.
Yeah, I recognized him from the Man from Hong Kong. I remember he was wearing like a blue turtleneck sweater or something, and he's fighting. Yeah, and I was like, yeah, that's that guy from the fight in the restaurant.
Man from Hong Kong. Yeah, he was the assassin.
The assassin.
In Man from Hong Kong. Yeah. You got chased in that great fight scene in the restaurant. I was only thinking. I was only thinking the other day, I really need to sit down and watch that movie again. I absolutely love that movie.
It's a hoot. It's so much fun.
It is. It's so much. It's so enjoyable. And the music of this, we always talk about music. Not a lot, except that it was written by Brian May yet again. Not Brian May from Queen, but Brian May, who did Patrick, and he's done Turkey Shoot, Mad Max, Frog Dreaming. So he's very prolific, sort of in Australian, soundtracks and things like that, especially with the Ozploitation movie.
Yeah, and for you horror fans out there and other monster kids, I read that he composed the scores to Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, and Dr. Giggles.
He did, right? I always thought that was really interesting. When I first read that, I was like, whoa, okay, interesting.
Oh, I was just going to comment on the score a little bit, because for the most part, I really liked it because the suspenseful moments are really well done, but I'm not sure how I feel about the main theme that plays throughout the film. It has a feel of like an American, like Western, like a cowboy movie, because it has this very 70s march element.
Yeah, it has very much a march element, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I'm not sure how I feel about that, but for the most part, I like the score.
Yeah, it's good. You can almost hear little, if you listen to the soundtrack of Turkey Shoot, there's kind of like that march sort of score as well. And it's kind of similar in a way. There's that sort of feel to it as well.
Yeah.
Whereas his music in Patrick is quite different and a little bit more soundtrack, more soundtracky. Is that even a word? But it just sounds more, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for?
Maybe conventional or
conventional. Yeah, more conventional sort of soundtrack. Whereas this is kind of conventional, but yeah, I'm with you. Some of it is a little bit too marchy, but I do like it. It's interesting.
Yeah, there's a scene when I think it's after Hitch gets taken in the green van, and I get these names mixed up all the time. Quid jumps in his truck and he's in pursuit of them, but then that march starts playing and it feels very upbeat, and I don't know, it has a very strange, I guess it's dissonant, or it doesn't quite match the suspenseful moment on screen to me.
Yeah. I think he could have done more with it in some parts, like you were just saying. It's not that suspenseful.
Right.
There's one piece that's really suspenseful that I'll talk about in a minute when we get to the movie, but it has nothing to do with the soundtrack, but it's still, to me, it's still music, but we'll talk about that in a bit.
Oh, okay.
So let's go through where we watched this. So I had the Blu-ray I got from Umbrella a while ago, which is a fantastic Blu-ray, has lots of extras. I watched a few of the extras yesterday when I was watching it. Also has a pretty good commentary. It's more of an interview kind of commentary, but it's actually quite good, and there's a few little interesting tidbits to take out of that. It's also amazingly on Shudder in Australia, which is fantastic. So if you're looking for it in Australia, it's the only place that's streaming it in Australia. So yeah. How about you?
I couldn't find it streaming here in the States, but I did find the Shout Factory Blu-ray, which has probably the same or very similar features as the Umbrella Entertainment release, because it has the Richard Franklin commentary and also a commentary with, I think, some of the other like casting crew, and like a making of it's branded by Anchor Bay, so it was probably ported over from a much earlier out of print release.
Yeah, I'd say so, because I think a lot of the stuff on the Blu-ray I was watching was introduced as Anchor Bay, and I think also there was a little documentary on the making of it. I don't know if you watched that at all, but that was actually had Anchor Bay in the title.
Yeah.
So I think it had a lot of old stuff in there, and it was not a 4K film, but it was a 4K restoration, and there was actually even a little featurette on the Blu-ray of how they went through the restoration and things like that, and it was quite interesting. You can definitely see the difference. I think when I think about my first time I ever saw this movie, and it was probably back, I would have seen this movie for the first time probably on VHS, and that's going back probably 85, something like that. And that was where I first saw it, and seeing like when they were going through this little featurette, the old print and what they'd done with it, and then the comparison with the new print, it's like, it's unbelievable. It's amazing how they do these things.
Oh yeah, and I'm really curious what it looked like before, because there are some shots that are so dark it's very difficult to see what's, at least to me, like what's happening on screen, and so I can only imagine like how dark and muddy, and grainy that would have looked before the restoration.
Yeah, I imagine early DVDs probably very artifacty and very muddy for sure, because there is a lot of darkness in it like that. But it looks really good. Lots of great features. Definitely worth picking up if you can get it. I really, really enjoyed it. I'd love to see a 4K. I also saw when I was looking during the week, there's a Blu-ray put out by a company. What was it? They started with an I. I'm trying to remember the name of it. And it was a fantastic release, and it had like a booklet, and it had a whole heap of other stuff. I'm just trying to remember the name of it. Is it not Illusion, or
was it Indicator?
Right. That's it, Indicator. Yeah. And it had a heap of extras, and I thought, this would be really good. I went to their website, and of course it's out of print. And then I thought, okay, let me go and look on eBay, and I'm like, holy shit, I'm not paying it wasn't that expensive, but because it wasn't available here, no one was selling it on eBay here. People were selling it for I think $60 or $80 in the US or in the UK, but they were going to charge like $40 or $50 for shipping to Australia. I'm like, what? Wow. So I'm like, forget it. I'll just keep my eye out for it and just see what happens. So, what were your initial thoughts?
Well, being my first time seeing it, I definitely noticed the Hitchcock vibes, because certainly Franklin is a big fan. I read that I think he was attending USC and film school in the States, and wanted to have access to one of Hitchcock's films. I can't remember which one, and he had to request permission. And so he wrote to Hitchcock's office. And then he was in class. Franklin was in class, and he was called to somebody's office, and they said, hey, you got a phone call. And it was Mr. Hitchcock. And he said, yeah, you can show this film. And Richard Franklin, being the bold man that he is, said, hey, well, would you like to come to the screening and answer some questions? And apparently he did. He graciously accepted. But I think also at the time, for some reason, like he was looked upon he was regarded as a hack filmmaker, which I thought was very strange looking back. But anyway, yes. So I definitely noticed a lot of those vibes, but it's so clear that Franklin was that he consumed and digested Hitchcock's approaches to building suspense and character, and I think it's really well done. I would say it doesn't even feel like an homage or like a love. I think it's more of a love letter.
Yeah, I think so too.
And but I'd say for the most part, it's masterfully executed.
He put it together really. Have you seen Psycho 2?
I have, yeah. That's a great film. Yeah,
he directed that, and that's probably
nice.
the best Psycho sequel, right?
It is.
Yeah,
I like
it's really
that one
well done. Yeah, I think there was something on the commentary last night where he was talking about he was under pressure when he made Psycho 2 to have Jamie Lee Curtis in that movie in Psycho 2, and he talked about it with her, and they decided that it would be too much of a nod, and it would also be giving away a lot of plot up ahead, and et cetera, et cetera. But Psycho 2 is one of my favorite Psycho movies.
That's a great one. I'd love to revisit at some point. Maybe I'll revisit that for Halloween this year.
Ooh, yeah, that'd be a good one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So for me, this movie's just like a really enjoyable thriller, right? It's just a really good. I don't know if it really gets up to a lot of suspense. There's a bit of suspense there, but I think it's enjoyable. I love the way it's made. I love the way we get things like we have these little characters interspersed in the different cars. So you've got the family, you've got the motorbike guy, you've got the what else have you got? You got the newlyweds, all sort of coming in and out of the movie at different times. The guy with the boat, all that sort of stuff.
That's a crazy scene.
It is all coming in and out of the movie at different times, and it really gives you a feel for like that whole, on the road as a truck driver, and I think some of the things they talked about was like when you are on the road and you're doing a long trip, you'll often be driving the same direction as a lot of other people, and you pass these people all the time. You stop off at a service station to get petrol, you see them, or they go past you and you catch up to them again and all this sort of stuff. And I think they do that really well in this movie. They're a little bit more involved with him, but especially the wife of the family in the car, which is quite a funny scene.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I connected with that, or that was very familiar to me because I used to travel a lot from college to see my parents, and it was probably 10, 12-hour drive, and so I was on the interstate most of the time, and it was very much like that, where you have people who are taking a family vacation, for example, or what have you. And so you'll pass them, or you'll see them at the gas station up ahead for several hours. And there's almost a sense of camaraderie or kinship, like we're all in this journey together.
I enjoyed Jamie Lee Curtis. I thought she was good. I thought the chemistry the two of them had was actually really good, especially for someone that's, even though he was, how old do you think he is in this movie? 40-something?
Yeah, I think so.
And
too
she's
old.
like 21.
As he said, too old.
Too old. Yeah, but they have really good chemistry. And, as before, she's just a bit underutilized in this movie. Once she's a fairly long time coming into the movie, and she's in that middle piece of the movie, the second act, I guess, for want of a better term. And then she gets abducted, and you don't see her again until for a minute at the end of the movie in the last scene, basically. So, yeah, a bit underutilized, but good nonetheless. She was right in the middle. I was looking at her IMDb last night. So she'd just done Halloween, and I think she'd also done Terror Train and a few other things. So this is right in the middle of her, her Scream Queen phase. Right. And it was quite amazing that she sort of found time to come and do this movie as well.
Yeah, I seemed like I had heard in some interview that the appeal was that very much like her character, like she was looking for not just adventure, but a bit of excitement. And so I think maybe the prospect of shooting it in Australia was appealing.
There were a few issues with her coming to Australia because there was a lot of issues apparently with the actors' equity and things like that, where they were kind of like, well, at the time they were very much about, especially in Australian cinema, was very much about taking people from overseas taking Australian jobs, right? This is back in the 70s, 80s. And And apparently there was quite a bit of animosity towards it, not so much with the crew, but there was a lot of questions asked about, why is someone from the US taking this role? And also things, when you think about it, it's an Australian movie with 2 American leads, which is quite interesting.
It is. Yeah. I was really curious to hear your thoughts on that because, as an Australian film, for the most part, I mean, the principal cast is American, but we don't really spend a lot of time with any of the locals, or I guess like any of the other characters that have any significant bearing on the plot. I mean, maybe the cops say a good bit, but really it's mostly just Stacy Keach and Jamie Lee Curtis.
Pretty much, right? It's just them. And it's interesting because you could have just as easily made the movie with an Australian cast, and I think it would just be just as good.
Sure, yeah.
I'm assuming because of the distributor, a few other factors, they're looking for more of an international audience or an American market.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So they're like, well, let's start off. They had Stacy Keach, and then later on they decided to add another American actor, Senator, with Jamie Lee Curtis. So I think a lot of it was probably just driven by them wanting to give it the best chance they could of success in the US, because obviously that's where the money is for a lot of these companies. So I don't think it was very successful in the US. I can't remember. I haven't looked at that. I think it probably made its money back all in all. But yeah, it was very interesting seeing them both in it. And it's just a bit odd sometimes because it's a very Australian. They're on the Nullarbor plain, and there's very Australian sort of things around them. There's kangaroos, there's Ocker people, there's that scene in the diner where the guy with the pinball machine and all the other guys very Australian and looking at them weirdly, and yeah, it just seems they seem a bit out of place at times. But yeah, it's pretty. I didn't mind it, but I can see why they did it.
And you might have come across this in some of the bonus features on the Blu-ray, but I believe it was Richard Franklin who was telling the story that whenever they were getting this film up and going and trying to get some prospective cast members together, that they wanted Sean Connery until they realized how expensive he would be.
Yes,
for Stacy Keach's role.
That's exactly right. They decided that he was written with Sean Connery in mind, and then they figured out that he would cost probably more than the budget of the whole movie. So they go, let's go to Stacy Keach.
Which was a substantial budget. I think it was $1.7 or $1.8 million, which I think was one of the more expensive movies made in Australia at the time.
At the time, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was, yeah, what is it, $1.8 million. Yeah, it was the most expensive film made at the time in Australia. So yeah. So obviously we know Sean Connery's salary at the time was more than $1.8 million. I guess. You could actually see him in the role though.
Yeah, no, he would have been fine here. But yeah, Stacy Keach, I actually just watched a film with him from the mid '70s. It was a John Huston film called Fat City with Jeff Bridges and Susan Tyrrell, who was in Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker, which if you haven't seen that, it's a great horror film. But yeah, I mean, Stacy Keach, he's one of those actors that I feel like now people don't really remember him or don't talk about him enough, but he had a pretty strong body of work there for a while. And he's a great actor, and he's really excellent here.
I had to look it up yesterday. I know this sounds very maudlin, but I was like, is he still alive? I was watching the movie and I was like, is he still alive? And I'm like,
is he?
He is. Okay. I think he's 80 something. And, wow. And yeah, he's still got something in production as well. So he's still acting.
It's incredible.
It is. But he's perfect for this. He learnt to drive a big rig for this movie. So, and which I think is really getting into it. Would have been just as easy to stick someone else in the truck and just do all the other stuff in his studio. And but he decided to learn to drive the truck, which is great. And I think he's well suited to the part. His background is good. Like, he's obviously an American that's come to Australia to seek out, an adventure as well, I guess, or something to do. He seems to be one of those people. He's a bit of a, I don't know if would you call him a drifter sort of character?
Yeah. I wonder, because even his I don't know what the proper name is, but his handle, like his CB handle, is Gypsy something.
Right.
And so he does have this, or it implies he has this nomadic kind of lifestyle where he just maybe goes place to place in search of adventure or what have you.
Yeah.
We do know that he's I guess somewhat of a sophisticated person, or he's a very learned person.
Yeah, because
so,
he's quoting, was he quoting Emily Bronte at one stage or something? And I think the movie almost starts with him like quoting other sorts of literature, and then he's got that great bit in the movie where he's kind of doing harmonica karaoke with classical music, and
that's wonderful. I've never seen anything like that.
It's great. It's such a great scene. I love it. And he's got the great relationship with the dog.
Oh.
The dog is like another character in this movie. He's so great. And I think as I think it was pointed out in the commentary as well, that it gives him someone to talk to when he's in the truck on his own, so he can actually kind of talk out loud and move the plot along a little bit by just talking to the dog.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that when we get into the movie.
Yeah, it's really good. It's great. Well, let's talk about the movie. It opens up pretty much with him pulling into a motel. He's been on the road and he's sort of getting sad. He sounds like he's been driving for a while and he's looking for a night off, and pulls into this motel, and he was going to get a room, but if he hadn't stayed on, he's sitting and chatting with, I think, someone on the radio from the meat company or from the truck company he's working for,
right,
getting him a new job, and he really shouldn't be taking another job, but he decides to take another job. My thoughts were like, he was on the radio for so long, he would have got the room, except the villain of the movie beats him to the room effectively.
It's a wonderful opening sequence, and as you mentioned, just a great way of introducing Quid and his relationship with Boswell, his
dog.
Dingo/dog.
Yeah,
and because it allows us to learn a lot about him from the start, and he's humorous, he's charming, especially with that woman on the radio, and later we'll see him play these road games to pass the time, and we see him with his mandolin and his harmonica. But there's just so much great character building here by having Quid talk to Boswell. And it's just like, people who drive a rig have to compensate for having no one to talk to, for one. But two, it allows the character to externalize his thoughts while also making sense under the circumstances. So it makes sense that he's talking to his dog. But for us, the audience, we're able to get a sense of what's going on inside his head.
It's a really good intro to him. The first couple of scenes are fantastic, like the whole him suddenly going, oh well, it looks like I'm sleeping in the truck tonight, sort of thing, and we get into the scene with the murderer with the villain of the movie, and he's obviously picked up a hitchhiker, and she looks very 70s, like with the faux wolf jacket or the coat and the fur coat and the hat and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, very 70s, right? Even though it was 81 or something like that. It was probably shot in 80, I guess. So we're coming off the 70s, and that's the thing I was talking about before. So the first thing is the use of the white light in the room.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite shots in this movie.
It's fantastic. I thought I was watching a Russell Mulcahy clip, right?
Yeah.
It was like bits. I was like, this would not be out of place. Well, except for the murder, it would not be out of place in Razorback or something like that. The look, and because you got that silhouette in the doorway, which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Like it, and that's in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah,
and just throughout, I mean, there's just really great shot composition and the framing, and it's even a cool transition, because what we leave Quid in the truck, and he makes a comment about the guy who picked up the hitchhiker. Yeah, so he's probably not even going to wait to take her socks off or something like that. Yeah. And then when we cut, it's on her feet, and we see her socks, and we pan up, and she's got the guitar, and when we left Quid, he's got his mandolin. And so there's just a lot of interesting, little elements that are kind of bleeding over into the next scene there. But but just the way it's framed, it's great. And also when you see the killer take out the guitar string, we see his iconic gloves. That's going to clue the audience in as to who he is whenever he shows up later. But it also made me think, I should restring my guitar. And so I did that today.
Well, there you go. And the music I was talking about before, right? The music without being part of the soundtrack.
Oh, yeah.
She's sitting on the bed. She's tuning the guitar.
Right.
And as he's walking towards her, she's tuning the guitar up. Right. So it's actually creating tension just in the sound of the guitar tuning, which I thought was fantastic. It was really well done. I'm sure it was done on purpose. I don't think it was mentioned at all, but it really makes a lot of sense. And it's kind of like having that, not having to have a whole musical piece under it, raising the tension, just the fact that she's tuning the guitar and the guitar is tuning up and up and up and up as he's getting closer is a really great scene. I loved it. It really made it stand out for me. Not so sure about the fact that she watched him put a guitar string around her neck and did nothing about it.
Right, yeah. But just kind of watches it come over her face and around her neck.
But it looks great, though, right?
It does.
So it's a great look. And they don't show it. They don't have to be gratuitous, so they don't show it. You see him, I think he pulls it. Is that he starts pulling it or something, or you see her eyes?
Yeah, and it immediately cuts to those trash cans outside, like the next day or next morning.
And that's an interesting scene, too, is like the garbage guys are coming and Smith or Jones, whatever his name is looking out the window, and he's got that look where he's coming out. Richard Franklin, I think, said in the commentary that it's a little bit of an ode to Psycho, the way that the curtain's pulling back and the hand is there and he's sort of peering out. And then we have Quid in the truck sort of noticing him doing that. And he lets the dog out and the dog's sort of sniffing at the garbage bags and you sort of go, oh, okay, I think I know it might be in that garbage bag, right?
Yeah. And it's a great bit of editing, too, there, and just the way that Stacy Keach is playing it, where he's looking like, well, that's a little odd. Like, why is that guy so interested in the trash being picked up at 5 o'clock in the morning?
And then you've got the old-time garbos, right? So you've got the garbage truck guys running around like they did in the 70s and 80s with the old trash cans, throw them into the back of the truck.
Right. Yeah.
Rather than today where they just have the big bins you put out the front and the truck comes by, picks it up and tips it in the truck.
Right.
And just seeing these guys run along with the garbage truck brought back all these memories, these childhood memories. You'd hear them in the morning, the two Garbo guys, you'd hear the truck and you'd hear the guys talking and you'd hear them running around and tipping the bins in. It was very personal because you actually almost got to know your garbage guys. I don't know if it was a thing where you're from, but in Australia, a lot of the time at Christmas time, you would leave a couple of bottles of beer in paper, wrapped Christmas paper on top of your bin for the garbage guys.
Yeah.
They would come around.
Yeah, I thought my mother was the only person that does that, but I think she'll still leave like a bottle of wine for the garbage people. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, we don't do that anymore because it's all faceless now.
It is, yeah. It's very impersonal.
So then we have the murder scene. We have them picking up the rubbish, and then I think we finally get to the title, right? Where they're packing the truck with the meat.
With all the piggies.
Yeah. All the piggies so they're doing that. He goes and picks up he's there hanging around. He's already playing his harmonica while he's waiting. And at one stage, because there's harmonica in the soundtrack, it seems like he's almost playing along with the soundtrack.
Right, yeah.
Which is really interesting. And then they have the logo on the side of the truck that's pleased to meet you, but it's spelled MEAT instead of MEET.
Yeah, and it's great because you see Quid point to it, and it's like he's asking one of the workers about it, and the guy like points to his shirt. Oh yeah, look, it's the pig that's on the wall over there. So, oh, good man. He just like gives him a thumbs up or a pat on the shoulder. Like you can't hear what they're saying, but it's still a good little scene.
Yeah. And then he drives off and he's reciting something apparently I only found out in the in the commentary, he's reciting from the Canterbury Tales or something. He's reciting some piece of, I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm
something
not
very
learned.
obscure, yeah.
Very obscure, yeah. And then we start seeing the characters that we're going to see throughout the movie. So we got I think they call the character Sneezy Rider, like the guy in the red motorbike.
Yeah.
So he's played by Robert Thompson, who is Patrick in Patrick.
Oh.
So, which is amazing because he looks nothing like him. When I first saw it, I didn't think anything of it. And when I was in the commentary, he was saying, "Oh, it's Robert Thompson from Patrick." And then I looked again and paused. I thought, "Oh, it is." The only problem is that in this movie, his hair's not really curly. Well, it's curly, but it's not big. And also it's dyed red. So
okay.
he just looks completely different, yeah. And after that movie, apparently he didn't do anything else. He kind of did the movie as a favour to Richard Franklin, and then he just sort of stepped away from film completely. So I don't even know what he does now. So, and then they've got is it Captain Careful? Is the guy with the boat
towing the boat? Yeah.
And also we got Fred and Frida Frugal, which are the family in the car, and they're going on holidays. And it's really interesting, I think, as he's driving along, he's kind of creating stories for all these people. So he knows they've been on holidays. So he's talking about, oh, you've been here and there, and I thought that was really good. And then he goes past Jones or whatever his name is, and I'm just going to keep calling him the villain. And he sees the esky, and it's kind of almost that whole Pulp Fiction thing. What's in the esky sort of thing?
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about with esky, right?
Yeah, the cooler or the lunchbox. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, we had a.
Yeah. No, it's fine.
So he's it's kind of like what's in the esky, and we find out later, and it's kind of nothing. But anyway, and then interesting to find out that apparently all the truck interiors were all shot in a studio.
Oh,
rather than on location. I think there was very few that were shot on location in the truck. Pretty much everything was shot in the studio. I
noticed that there were some insert shots of the speedometer, and they were in miles per hour.
Yeah, not
in kilometers per hour. Yeah,
I think Australia was probably just transitioning to that. I think I can't remember when it actually came. The metric system came in probably a bit before that, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, and there was still, I'm assuming even if it was only a couple of years before, there was probably still trucks and cars on the road that had the old miles per hour on them.
Right.
Yeah, that was interesting to see, yeah. And, of course, then we see him, like we spoke about before, the scene where he's playing, harmonica to the classical music, which I thought was great.
Which, I wonder if that was him actually doing that, because, I mean, it appeared as though he was actually performing that on the harmonica.
Yeah, it seems like it, because it was pretty rough. Like it wasn't, fantastic. They probably just said, well, I don't know if Stacey Keach plays harmonica, but they probably said, well, here's a harmonica that's in the same key as the music, so just do some stuff on that, So,
yeah.
I love it when he puts the holder over his head, and I'm like, oh, we're in for some harmonica here, and there we go. It's really, really cool. I love the cabin of the truck. It's really cool. He's got his little fridge next to him, and he reaches in and gets his little, something out for the dog, and
that's right.
And stuff. Yeah, I was watching it with May, and May's like, he's eating carrots, and she's like, oh, he's a bit healthy for a truck driver. Then we get the scene where Frida Frugal, I think her name is, lays that trap for him, like puts all that paper or whatever it is across the road.
Yeah, I was a little confused by that because it happened so quickly. It looks like just tissue paper or something.
Tissue paper, across toilet paper or something.
The road, yeah.
Yeah, just to stop him. I mean, he could have driven straight through it, but I think it gave him a bit of a fright.
Right.
And there's that whole piece. So to me, it's obvious that for whatever reason, her and her husband have had an argument in the car, and he's kicked her out of the car in the middle of the Nullarbor Plain.
Yeah, that whole thing was a little confusing because, correct me if I'm wrong, but we later find out that they're on the run because this is Madeline Day, right?
Yeah.
We learned that they're on the run because her husband was accused of being responsible for this meat workers strike that's caused meat to become scarce.
Oh, I didn't pick that up. How's that? That's good.
Yeah, and so there's a reference, and I only caught this because of the subtitles, but there's a reference to Floyd Day, and that's the guy that is. That whole thing was a little confusing because there's this subplot about this workers' strike and meat being scarce, and we come back to it a few times throughout the movie, but nothing really seems to come of that.
No, it doesn't. The only thing I thought was interesting to come of that, there's a newspaper headline, like the thing they stick outside the newsagent that says, I think it says, "Butchers strike again."
Right,
I think. And I was like, oh, that could mean physically, or actually the butchers are on strike, so there's a meat shortage. But I'm like, well, it also could mean the butcher, as in the killer strikes again. Like butcher strikes again. So I'm thinking, I wonder if he probably put that in because it could be read both ways.
I like
even though
that.
It's meant to be about the butchers being on strike and the meat shortage. But I'm like, oh, it could also mean, what's his name as well? It could also mean the killer as well. So, yeah. Or either that or it's just me. I don't know.
Hey, that's part of the fun is that there are infinite ways that we could interpret and read a lot of this stuff, and that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, it does make it fun. Yeah, the interpretation. Like I missed that whole thing you just mentioned about them. I thought they were just on holiday or something. But yeah, so I don't know what they argue. I don't know how anyone would argue enough with somebody that they supposedly loved that they would just leave them in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and that's also strange because we'll get to it in a minute, whenever she's at the edge of the cliff and she says to Quid that her family was threatened and they killed her dog because of this whole strike thing. Like there's some kind of strong arm politics going on. And so I don't know if maybe he was just trying to get ahead, like to flee for safety, but whatever they argued about, it was enough for him to abandon her.
Maybe.
I don't know.
It's interesting, my uncle used to be a union boss at a large petroleum company in Australia, Caltex. And when there was a lot of fuel strikes in the 70s and things like that, and he used to get like death threats, and he used to get things like people delivering manure to his front yard and stuff like that. Because he was the union boss. So he's the guy that's calling the strike and the public face of the union to the TV and all that sort of thing. So if this guy's involved the same sort of way with maybe the butchers or the meat packers or whatever it is, then I can kind of understand where that pressure's coming from. Now, I don't think that my uncle never had things as bad as that happened to him as what they mentioned in the movie, but he did get death threats and he did get, crank calls and he did get people, doing stuff like that. But I don't think he ever felt physically in danger, but there was people doing stuff like, like that all the time. So I can kind of imagine the stress that would come with that.
Yeah, I tried to do a little research to see if maybe that was in reference to something specific that was happening at the time, but I couldn't really find anything that seemed, I guess, to be a strong connection to that little subplot. But because I was wondering if maybe Franklin was trying to comment on something there, but it could be just incidental.
Maybe. I know there was a part in the commentary where he was going to start talking about unions and unionism, and he said, I have to be very careful what I say. And then he didn't actually say anything. So he kind of changed the subject.
Oh, my. So there could be
I'm just
something
wondering
there.
if he's had some union issues over the year, and he obviously must have copped some flack for this movie as well, but I wonder if he's had some issues over the years. So he picks up Frida Frugal, which I think is really weird, and she's really strange, and she keeps carrying that hairspray with her in case he's crazy or something like that. She's going to spray him in the face with a hairspray. And they start playing these road games, right? And she's picking all this weird stuff, and eventually she gets to the point where it's a animal or a living thing that's larger than I thought she said bread box.
Bread box. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, and he goes through all the answers, and he can't get it, so he gives up again because I think she's already caught him once or twice before, and he's getting quite frustrated. And she said, "The man we just passed," and we get to see this whole piece about the killer that's digging holes and we think is obviously burying bits of the body, right? And I thought that was a great way of bringing that in.
Okay, this time I've got a real good one.
No, I've had enough.
Oh, come on, it's really easy. And it's not even animal product, it's just plain, ordinary animal.
Okay, but no tricks.
I'll give you a clue. It's bigger than a bread box.
Me?
No.
Boswell?
No.
Well, it's got to be you.
Wrong.
Lady, if there's an animal bigger than a bread box inside this truck, you better tell me about it.
I never said it was inside the truck.
The pigs?
No.
Kangaroo?
No.
An emu?
No.
Well, the Nullarbor nymph. Lawrence of a friggin' Arabia. I don't know, this is crazy.
You give up?
Yeah, I guess so.
Was that man back there?
I didn't see any man back there.
Of course you didn't. You were too busy arguing. But there was a man back there standing beside a dark green van, and he was digging a hole.
Yeah, this reminded me of a scene in Jeepers Creepers, which, of course, also it pays homage to things like Spielberg's Jewel, which I think this film also does to a degree. But it also uses the same kinds of techniques where, oh, there's a man and he's dumping something down that chute. I wonder what it could be.
Yeah,
and so there's all this, kind of waiting around and watching to see what's going to happen, which is very much like what happens here, because we've heard on the radio, I believe, up to this point, that there's a maniac on the loose, and Quid only heard this passively, or he seemed to get a sense of something going on, but he wasn't paying that much attention. And this woman brings that back up about this maniac, and then he becomes interested, and so then he starts to piece things together. Because of the strange guy in the green van that he saw, I guess, the previous night. And said, oh, well, this could be the guy. What if it's the guy? He must be burying body parts.
Interesting, too, that he gets his binoculars out and he's having a look at his binoculars and he turns around, like the villain turns around and sees him. Then he quickly puts them down and does sort of like, no, I'm not looking sort of thing. Which is so weird. Yeah, and then he just keeps on going on. I'm assuming he just finished burying the bodies and drives off. So, and then we have this whole conversation I think we were going back to before about from Frida, who she suddenly sort of starts thinking, oh, maybe Quid's the guy that's killing these women. Did you get that feeling from watching it?
Yeah,
and that's that whole piece where she runs off, right?
Right, and I wonder. I mean, this is, like we said, probably shot in 1980 when hitchhiking, probably in Australia as well, but especially here in the States, we got a bunch of movies about hitchhikers and hitchhikers being murdered or hitchhikers being murderers. And
like the Hitcher.
The Hitcher, yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so I guess that it's just incredible looking back at how naive people were back then about riding with strangers. But here she's not that suspicious of him at first, but she's got her guard up. And then over time, she becomes increasingly suspicious just because of how almost manic and obsessive Quid gets about this, this killer that they've been talking about. And yeah, she eventually runs off to the end of the edge of the biggest cliff I've ever seen. It's incredible. I've never seen anything like this before in my life. And she just keeps backing up as he's approaching her. And you just know she's going to fall. But he eventually catches her and says, okay, no more games. Let's just go back to the truck.
Yeah. It's really a great scene. And I was like, when I first watched it, I was like, oh, I never knew the road was that close to like the edge of Australia. I knew the Nullarbor is kind of like south. It's sort of a separate part of the country. But then when I was listening to the commentary, he was saying there's parts of the Nullarbor, the road going along the Nullarbor, where you only have to go a couple of 100 metres and you're at the edge of the country because it's right on the Great Australian Bight. That bit of Australia, it looks like it's been bitten out.
Oh, yeah.
At the bottom, it's kind of like goes along there. And apparently a lot of that road is very close. The only other thing he said, there's in the passage of time in the movie, he leaves Melbourne and he's pretty much at the Nullarbor on the same day. He says it actually takes longer to get to the Nullarbor than it does to get from where he is, probably a couple of days. So, but obviously they've got to shorten things down. The other thing I thought was really interesting about this movie, just going back to some of the stuff that happened, is they shot the movie mostly kind of in sequence in a lot of ways. So they actually filmed all the way from the Nullarbor to Western Australia, and they actually filmed on the way as they were going. So they didn't go to one location and just film it in that location. They actually kept moving along until they got to Western Australia, which I thought was a really interesting way of shooting the movie.
Yeah, and I guess in a way, much more economical to do it that way.
For sure.
From having to go back and forth, different locations.
Yeah, the interesting thing was he was saying that when they shot all Jamie Lee Curtis's parts, she had to fly back to Melbourne and just cool her heels while they finished shooting up to Western Australia, and then she had to shoot some more interior shots and some other shots in Melbourne, like for the end of the movie.
Oh,
and
okay.
so she just basically went back to Melbourne and just sat on her hands for a week or so, apparently.
Okay.
So, there you go.
It's a paycheck.
Exactly. Yeah, it would have been on paid time. Yeah, it's all good. I really like the scene. I think he said that the bit where her feet are right at the edge, I haven't seen a lot of Hitchcock. Well, I've seen quite a few Hitchcock movies. I think he mentions Rebecca. Have you seen Rebecca?
I haven't seen Rebecca.
And I think that's a movie he sort of talked about when you get that shot of her feet so close to the edge of the cliff.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still all this, everything in this movie, and Patrick always leads back to Hitchcock. You can see it. There's so many different parts.
I was trying to find a way of describing it earlier. Like, I mean, certainly we could say this is a Hitchcockian thriller because it's very much presented to us that way. But it's almost like when you learn a language, and it's like Richard Franklin learned the language that Hitchcock spoke and is speaking to audiences in the same dialect or the same language. I don't know. I can't really quite articulate this idea, but it's like he uses so many of the same techniques or a lot of the same devices, but it just, I guess there's something much more higher level, I guess, operating there that I can't quite put my finger on.
All right, so then we move on to the roadhouse. I think that's the next scene, effectively.
Yeah.
And so this whole the outside was on location, but the whole interior of the roadhouse was a set.
Oh, okay.
Apparently, a lot of it was lifted from the roadhouse. What was already at the roadhouse. I thought it was interesting, the artwork on the walls of this roadhouse, like all the Aboriginal artwork, and a lot of the artwork seemed to be around the terrible things that happened to the Aboriginal people.
Right, yeah.
I thought it was interesting they had that in there. I'm not sure if that was in the original Roadhouse, but it was a really interesting set because you had the poker machine, you had the snooker table, and you had the
Playboy
jukebox and the Playboy pinball machine. I always wanted
great.
one of those. Yeah. I love seeing. I think we watched what was the other movie? There was another movie I did. I'm trying to remember the movie now. Might have done it with Tess Patton. Was it Next of Kin? I think there was. I think it was that one. And there was a pinball machine in there. I think it was a Kiss pinball machine. And I always wanted a Kiss pinball machine. Yeah, but
that'd be great to have.
Not to be. I would still love a pinball machine, but I just got nowhere to put it.
Yeah, same. Yeah. The one that I always wanted was the Twilight Zone pinball machine.
Oh yeah, that's a great
really
one.
cool.
Or the Addams Family one was great.
Yeah,
too. Yeah, I love that one. I love pinball machines. Definitely.
I was going to ask you about those murals on the wall in the Roadhouse because, we see the Aborigines represented there, but also these soldiers or colonists. And I was just going to ask you because maybe you would have more insight as to what that might be suggesting because it seems to be very violent depictions.
It's probably once again, I don't know if it was in that roadhouse. It's interesting it would be in a roadhouse because to me that is talking about a pretty bad time in the history of Australia when it was colonised, and then we had these terrible things happen to Aboriginal people when they were almost trying to wipe them out from the country. Where there was I didn't do pre-work on this, so I'm going to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, but there was essentially genocide in Tasmania of the Aboriginal people. They killed thousands and thousands of them just because they didn't want them around. And then we had that whole piece in the 60s and 70s with the stolen generation where they took children away from their Aboriginal families and basically put them in white Anglo-Saxon Australian families because they felt like the Aboriginal families couldn't bring them up properly, which was just terrible for the Aboriginal people. Now there's issues in Australia with COVID with the Aboriginal community as well. So these guys have never really had a good run in here, and terrible to say, and I hate getting political, but a lot of it is they were probably going fine until white people came to the country, right?
Right.
So it's just...
I mean, it's very much the same here in the U.S. with Native Americans because there was so... I mean, that's a whole thing, but the Trail of Tears and these... all these tribes just wiped out because, well, this is our land now, and so we've got to get you out of here. And yeah, so there's a lot of that here too. And
it's interesting going back to that, like there's a few other things coming up in the next set that I want to talk about in that bathroom that are written on walls. But we'll get to that.
Yeah, here in the Roadhouse, and I figured you might comment on this a little bit, but I guess the owner of the Roadhouse mentions to Quid about his dingo. He said, "Oh, did you know about the bounty on dingoes?" And I didn't know that they're considered pests in most Australian states. And I just Googled this because I was curious. The way I understand it is that they're on a government-sanctioned kill list in every state except for the Northern Territory where they're protected. And
pretty much,
could you talk a little bit about that?
I don't know enough about it to really talk to it, but I know they're considered a pest, and they're in a lot of places where people are warned about them. So people go to, is it Fraser Island? Maybe it's Fraser Island, where there's always warnings to people about don't feed the dingoes, don't attract them, don't talk, like don't try to pat them. They're not dogs; they're wild animals, etc., etc. Because they look like dogs, right?
Right,
but they're wild. They're wild animals. So I don't know anything really about any current laws that are there, but they are known as pests. It's interesting because there's a few mentions of pests in this, as well as rabbits in this movie as well. But yeah, they're known as pests. I don't know about them, being shoot on sight. That could still be the case. I'm sure farmers have an issue with them because they would be a danger to livestock and things like that.
Yeah.
And of course we have the most famous one, which I guess my name of my podcast is based on. All right, back to the movie.
Yeah.
Where were we? So we were talking about the Roadhouse. Yeah, so the interior was a set. We've got all this artwork. We've got this great 360 shot. Which Franklin admitted himself that it was quite indulgent. He was saying that in a lot of the distributors, once they got their hands on the movie in the US and in other places, cut that whole scene out in regards to the way it spins around and does the whole 360 thing. He said if he did it again, he'd probably go a little bit faster because it was a bit slow.
Oh, yeah.
So, but I thought it was good, and it's sort of the scene he's trying to obviously call the police and he's having trouble with them understanding his name. It seems really weird that they just don't understand him or something. It's like a bad line or... Yeah,
he makes a comment that there's a poor connection or something because he has to spell his name, which is 4 letters, and he has to spell it like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
It's like what is it? I as in ice cream? He's like, ICECRE. What am I doing?
Exactly. Yeah, it's really Yeah, it's a bit weird. It is a bit of a long scene.
Yeah.
And but we end up seeing, the bike guy come in and have his sneeze. Oh, I forgot. When we introduced the motorbike guy, what do they call him?
Oh.
Sneezy rider.
Yeah, Sneezy
and
rider.
He's got his face mask on and he's riding his motorbike and he sneezes in his face mask. I always think about that with motorbike riders. Like, what if you sneeze and you get this face mask down over you? Anyway.
Well, I'm glad you brought up that shot because I feel like that Franklin was like, that's the reason why we have that mural there. And like, for us to pan around and to see all of that, like there is some narrative there that maybe he was trying to draw our attention to. But I mean, yeah, it is a long shot, but it does feel like he was trying to use that moment to communicate something, but I'm not really sure what that is. So.
Yeah, I'm not really sure either. It was either that or just to say, well, I've spent money building this set. We really need to
right.
at least show it. Yeah. But it's cool. It's very cool.
Yeah.
And he goes outside and someone's injured his dog, and we think, or we're pretty sure that it's Smith or Jones, right? Mm-hmm. It's the bad guy. I don't know what he actually did to the dog. The dog just sort of looks sad more than anything.
Yeah, it's not really clear if he physically hurt him or gave him some poison or something.
Yeah, or just told him he was a bad boy or something.
That's what it seems like. Yeah, just very sad.
He just looked like he was, yeah. And so then we've got this first chase, right? So he takes off in the truck. Oh, before we go on, you got anything else to say about the Roadhouse?
Oh. No, I'm good.
No, all good. So then we have the first chase scene and we're off. And I think the chase scene is done really well considering it's a truck chasing a van. You would think the van would be able to get, ahead by a long way. And this is where we've got the whole thing about the boat.
Yeah, with Captain Careful.
Yeah, Captain Careful in his Leyland P-76 pulling this boat. So these cars, I don't know if you had them in America, a Leyland P-76, they were around in the 70s and 80s. They were a bit of a lemon of a car. Mm. And they were saying that that car pulling that boat could only get to about 40 miles an hour because it just was so underpowered for having a boat on the back of it, especially that size boat.
Right, yeah.
And I just found it really odd that when Quid's trying to get around him, he's driving slowly, but he keeps trying to block him from passing.
I didn't understand that. I thought maybe I missed something, like maybe he pissed him off, but he's okay, yeah, all right, guy, Captain Careful, look out, like this is what you want, you're going to get it, and that's when he starts screwing up his boat.
It's kind of like the antithesis of being Captain Careful, right?
Yeah.
if you're Captain Careful, you're kind of just going to let him go by and continue the whole thing, right?
Yeah, because he allows his boat to fall off, and I don't know why I can never think of his name, but Quid just barrels through it, and it just explodes into splinters, and the Captain Careful comes out, and he's obviously upset about it because he's jumping up and down on the ruins, the rubble of his boat. And so, I don't know, that just didn't make much sense to me. Like, why?
It didn't make any sense. No. Why you wouldn't just let the truck, especially a semi-trailer, right? I know if I'm on the freeway and for whatever reason there's a semi-trailer and it's hooting along, I know if it's going to go past me, I don't want it in my back window.
Right.
I want it to get past me, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to let it go. It, for whatever reason, Captain Careful isn't very careful. So anyway, so I think what happens? Does the purple van get away?
I think so.
Because it gets away, and then he stops because we finally get to the bit where he picks up Jamie Lee Curtis.
Right, yeah, this is where we meet Hitch for the first time.
Yeah. So she comes into the movie, and interesting to know, like I said, we had somebody initially cast for that role, but
an Australian actress, I believe.
An Australian actress, yeah. I don't know how she felt about it, but anyway, she probably was never a really big Jamie Lee Curtis fan.
Never again.
Never again.
Was it?
It's still go on.
No, sorry.
I was just going to say, I'm still kind of blown away that he managed to get Jamie Lee Curtis in this movie, who within, the next 5 to 10 years would end up being a pretty big star. Like, I still think her peak for me is like True Lies.
Oh, sure, yeah.
She is so good in that movie.
Oh, love that movie.
When she broke out of the Scream Queen thing, and Fish Called Wanda, she's great in that.
Yeah.
And it's great that she gets into this movie, but this is very early in her career, right? But I was just thinking last night when I was looking at her filmography, forget all the stuff like that I like about the horror films that she's been in a lot of stuff, and she's had a great career.
Yeah, let me look this up. I'm trying to remember when Trading Places came out.
It's another one.
Yeah.
She's
that was 1983, so that was a couple years after. But
and when was True Lies?
That was 1994, I think.
So it was a bit later again. Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting that she's sort of gone back to her roots now with the Halloween stuff.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned or that we're talking about Jamie Lee Curtis here, because it's so easy now to look at this movie through the lens of today and all of the success that she's had since, and to say, oh, well, Jamie Lee Curtis must have been big stuff back in the day because she had done Halloween, which she had, and that was successful. But certainly she was, she was a name, she was a face, but not to the degree that she would several years later. Franklin had easy access to her because I think he knew John Carpenter from film school, from USC. And so he, in one interview that I watched with him, he just called up John Carpenter and said, hey, Jamie Lee Curtis, how do I get in touch with her? And gave him her number. And so it was that easy. Like, she was that accessible, I think, at least in their circles. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. But she's had a great career. It's I really like her. I've got a big soft spot for Jamie Lee Curtis. I think she's really good.
Me too.
Looking forward to the new Halloween film. That'll be interesting. What did you think of the last one? Did you see the last one?
I did. Yeah, I liked it pretty well. I had a good time with it. I don't know. I'm a little tired of these strange continuity changes where, okay, we're going to make a sequel, but we're going to make a direct sequel to the first one. We're going to ignore all that comes after. Oh, but then we're going to do that again. So that's what they did with, what was it? Halloween H2O. Okay, well, we're going to ignore everything that came after Halloween or Halloween 2. And then now we're going to go back and ignore that even happened. So I don't know. There's a lot of that erasure that I don't know how I feel about, but I'm starting to appreciate it a little bit more, that there's a kind of multiverses in a way. And, but no, I mean, I like it. I think it's a cool take, and I'm glad we're still seeing Halloween movies because they're still fun.
So he picks up Hitch and he says to her, the first lines are, aren't you too young to be hitchhiking, or something like that. And then she says, aren't you too old to be picking me up, which I think is really good. Great line.
Yeah,
and
I like that.
And they start having this whole through their, getting to know each other. They start having this whole conversation about the killer, and talking about, she's talking about saying it's all about sex for some reason. I was trying to work out why she said it's all about sex. Did you remember that bit?
Yeah, I remember that conversation, and I'm trying to remember why, because she's trying to get it out of Quid to get why, or trying to understand what his perspective is, like what is the killer's attitude towards women, and whether or not he, well, they say makes love to them before he kills them. But I'm not sure what the rationale behind that is. Quid even says that he must detest women. Yeah. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one.
Yeah.
And then they get pulled over by the police, and he gets these police that are really strange, wearing those sunglasses that makes them look really suspect anyway. And they have a car that looks like it's a police car that looks like it was in a B version of Mad Max sort of thing.
Yeah.
and it's kind of like the questions they ask, they're very aggressive towards him for someone they're just questioning about a few different things.
Yeah, they're trying to be very intimidating.
And it's not working. But and they say, "What are you carrying?" And he gives them that look and says, "Pigs," which is great.
Yeah.
But then they insist on looking through his logbook, and it all checks out. But they still say, "Oh, logbooks can be changed," which they can, I guess. But it's almost like they're trying to pin it on him just so they can get it done.
Right. Yeah, that's how I took it too. And I wasn't even sure if they were being truthful about this, but they mentioned that his name was in the motel registry where the hitchhiker had gone missing. And even Quid says, well, anybody could have written my name in that book, but I don't know. I thought that was very odd. But I like the exchange here that Quid says he doesn't want to be hung for something he didn't do, and the cop corrects him. He says, "Meat is hung, men are hanged."
Yeah.
Which I was like, that's a pretty baller line.
It's a good line, yeah. But I guess he could have written his name down because, like he said, it was on the side of his truck. So
that's true. Yeah, I just noticed that towards the end of the movie today.
So they have that whole conversation, and then they go away. But I really in these scenes, there's this whole scene. So there's that scene. Then there's a scene where they camp at night, where they have to stop at night, and I actually really like the chemistry with Stacey Keach and Jamie Lee Curtis in this movie. I think they really play well off each other.
They do, yeah.
Especially in this scene where they're camping and they're just sort of sitting around the campfire and they're talking. And he tells this story about the town that they're at. I can't remember the name of the town, but it's a true town. And the story about the rabbits basically killing the town off is a true story about that town. It was effectively overrun by rabbits, so anything that was growing there just died off and the whole town just died and everyone moved out.
Yeah,
so
it's a very, very cool story, and I like that they're telling it around a campfire.
Yeah.
But yeah, apparently this was near like an old telegraph station, and we get a glimpse of that the next morning. But yeah, there was just something about this moment where everything kind of stops, and it's a very semi-intimate moment with Quid and Hitch. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a bit of a breathing moment just to sort of take a breath and sort of have that little bit of a pause before things ramp up again.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's really good. And then they have there's that little bit of romantic tension at the end where they look sort of into each other's eyes like they're going to embrace or kiss or something. But you seem to get that feeling, especially from Jamie Lee Curtis. Mm-hmm. But it's like I think he almost says, maybe I am too old or something like that, and decides to just leave it be. You know?
Yeah,
so,
yeah. There's that almost moment, and then he gets distracted by something. I think it's the tomorrow's bacon thing that's
right.
That she's written on the back of the.
Oh, was that
trailer.
the next morning?
Oh, that was the next morning.
Yeah. But or was it? I can't remember. Anyway, and then there's a bit where Hitch wanders off to go to the loo, I imagine, and she can't just go on the tree behind them or behind the tree or behind the truck. She decides to go up and over the hill, and we get a glimpse of the van.
Right, it's like in a like a lightning flash or something.
Yeah,
right?
It's really well done.
Yeah, that's
I love
cool.
the way. Yeah, the lightning, and it keeps showing him at the van. And obviously she goes back and tells him about it. But it's a really great scene. I love that scene. Really good. Yeah, and that's when the next morning she writes on the back, what does she write?
Tomorrow's bacon.
Tomorrow's bacon or something. Yeah. They were saying in the commentary that they forgot to take a photo of that. So for continuity, every time you see it in the future, they didn't have any reference for it. So they just wrote it on again, but it looks a bit different every time. I didn't notice it, but
yeah, there's a moment there that's pretty interesting where she says to Quid, "Why do you always speak in poems?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and so I like that she's noticing things about him and questioning, like wanting to know a little bit more about like what makes him tick. But her response, like to kind of button up this scene, is I can't remember the full thing, but it's some little rhyme that ends with tomorrow's bacon.
Oh yeah.
So it's like she responds with a similar like poetic thing that I thought was kind of neat.
Pig in a poke, you better start shaking. Today's pig is tomorrow's bacon.
So the next day they drive off, and then they find they're at another service station, and the guy that's carrying—I forgot to mention the guy that's carrying all the balls.
All the balls.
Back of his
That guy's got balls.
That guy's got balls. And he's pulled up, and his alarm's going off. So this gets called out earlier when he goes past the car the first time. There's a sticker on the back of the car that says "protected by whatever alarm" or something like that.
Oh, that's right. I do remember that.
And he drives into the servo, and his alarm's going off, and he can't stop it, sort of thing. And I think it's interesting, the back of his car, you could tell this was made for an American audience because it's an Australian movie, but there's American footballs in the back of the car.
Oh, yes.
Right. So I'm like, there's no way if this is made for Australian audiences, just for Australian audiences, they're going to have American footballs in the back of the car. They're going to have just like soccer balls and rugby league balls or rugby balls and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was just really odd anyway.
No, that's I didn't pick up on that at first, but
because in the 70s and 80s, NFL would have been almost unknown here in regards to what people are into sporting wise.
Yeah,
it's only really been probably the last 10 years that it's really picked up. In regards to interest. There's no people play it here, but there's no like proper leagues or anything that I know of.
Oh.
But people follow the NFL here pretty closely. Some people do.
Interesting. Yeah.
And they get to the servo and they see the van at the back, right?
Yeah.
And they think he's in the toilet.
Right.
The funny toilet with the Fred Flintstone and Wilma Flintstone.
That's cool. That's a cool bit of production design there to mark the men's and the women's restrooms.
Men's and the lady. Yeah. She goes off to look at the van because they're absolutely certain that he's gone into the toilet. And he goes into the toilet.
What does he have? It's like
it's a fan from a car, like that sits in front of the radiator to keep the car going. Yeah. It's very cool. He goes and he starts shaking down the guy in the cubicle, thinking it's a murder, and we're supposed to think it's a murder because he's wearing these like black shoes and all this sort of stuff. And
because all murderers wear black shoes.
Black shoes, right? And there's some very unfortunate writing on the walls, which I don't know whether I'm assuming this was done on location rather than on a set, because I don't think on a set you would have written things on the wall that you saw on those walls. Did you notice it?
I did.
Some of it was quite homophobic, and some of it was quite racist.
Right.
Once again, this is a movie that's shot late 70s, early 80s, so they don't have the sensibilities we have these days and the maturity. But I still think even for the time, I don't see why you would leave that sort of thing in, why you wouldn't take it away. Even worse if you actually added it to your set. But,
Yeah, like it would make sense if it was a foreign film crew that didn't understand like the context of those racial slurs.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you would think that the crew would have noticed that and maybe avoided that if it was on location.
Anyway, enough of that. So he's shaking down the guy in the cubicle. Turns out it's our mate Sneezy Rider,
who has said nothing this whole time.
I know.
As Quid is, he's calling him out. Yeah, this is which is what you're going to get for hurting my dog, and the guy doesn't say anything the whole time.
Wouldn't you think if you were sitting in a toilet and some guy walked in and started accusing you of all this stuff, you'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about, mate?
Right.
And then you get out there as soon as you can to confront him, right?
Yeah.
To say, what are you talking about? Let's talk about this.
Scared shitless, just sitting there on the toilet.
Anyway, so it's quite funny. And obviously then you go, oh, shit, where is he? She looks into the van. He's not there. But then she crawls into the back, and he's in a sleeping bag or something in the back. And then we see him wake up, And then that's the last we see of Jamie Lee Curtis until the end of the movie.
Yeah. I do want to mention before we move on that before they notice the van, she goes off and makes a call to her father to tell him that she's okay. And she's mentioned earlier that her father is shacked up with a prostitute. And so whenever she goes back to Quid and is kind of telling him what happened, so my step hooker got on the line. And there's just something about that reference to it. Her step hooker.
I never picked up on that. I didn't.
That's brilliant, right? There's some very colorful dialogue in this film, just punctuated throughout.
It's pretty well written, actually, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, so we don't see her again. She's gone. She's with him. And Hitch, and I'm probably jumping ahead, but he's like, he doesn't think in one hand he thinks he's the murderer, but the next thing he's like, oh, she ran off with him.
Right.
Like, what? It just makes no sense. But anyway.
Yeah.
There's a bit where he goes to steal the motorbike. That's classic. He goes to steal this motorbike owned by Sneezy Rider and rides it about 10 meters and then crashes it. Which is fantastic. It's really funny. And it's interesting because in the commentary, Franklin says, I wanted to do a scene where, you see in a movie, you always see the hero jumping onto a motorbike and just taking chase.
Yeah.
And he wanted to do a different thing where he gets on the motorbike and kind of realizes, oh, shit, I can't ride this. Then he decides to get back in his truck.
And also he realizes he forgot Boswell.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So he gets the rig going.
He gets the rig going and gets in that. And he knocks over the tank on the way out.
Yeah.
Which Franklin said was built by the film company. So he asked them if he could knock it down. They go, yeah, fine, knock it down. And it was only after they shot it and the evening after he'd shot it, he was like, why the hell didn't I fill it with water?
Oh.
So the water would have been more spectacular.
Yeah.
So Quid's not really sure whether Hitch was abducted or she just went off, and he has this whole conversation with himself in the cabin and with the dog about whether she took off with him or, she's going to be killed or whatever,
Yeah, it's like he's trying to talk himself out of caring. Yeah, he's just like, wow, the hell with her. And, well, I hope she takes his wallet. And then he checks his back pocket. Oh, well, yeah, at least she didn't take my wallet. So there's just, for such a serious film that takes itself very seriously, I like that there are these humorous moments of levity, that punctuate a lot of these long stretches of tension.
So he's looking for her. Is he really looking for her? And he stops at the rest station or the rest stop, and he gets out of the truck. And, he sees the van, right?
Yeah.
He sees the van on the side of the road.
He sees the van, and just before this, I believe, I could be mistaken, but we get a lot of story elements through the news, like through the radio, and we learn that Pamela, which is Hitch's real name, is the daughter of, I think they said, a U.S. diplomat and heiress to something, and police are looking for Quid because they know that she's traveling with him, and and there's a cool shot there of him just taking this all in, like, I'm screwed. And he's trying to figure out, what do I do? I got to ditch this rig. And in the midst of all that, he stumbles upon the green van yet again, thinking it abandoned.
So he gets out of the truck. He gets out of the truck here. And is this the area where he hears the back door open? That's a bit further on, isn't it?
I think that's a little bit later.
After this,
yeah.
So he finds the van on the side of the road, and he gets out to have a look at the van. And I think there's no one in the van that he can see.
Mm-mm.
And then he hears somebody sound like they're having sex off in the distance.
Yeah.
So he wanders through the bush to investigate, and he's pretty sure that it's Mr. and whatever his Jones or whatever his name is, and the villain and Hitch, and he's going on about that. He gets to a point where he goes, oh, I'm not going to bother anymore. I'll go back to the truck. And then we get this other shot with a bit of a crane shot, I think it is, and we see that over the rise that it's the newlyweds in their van.
Right. Yeah. No, that's great, because I like this in movies whenever the audience is privy to information that the character doesn't see or have access to. So we know that, okay, well, it's probably not Hitch and the villain, that it's the couple that was just married.
So then he goes back into his truck and he's driving along, and there's that bit where every time he changes gear, because of the movement of the truck, the back door bangs. So we know that the door's been open. I think we also see it when he's driving away. You see the door open at the back and then close, and you hear the banging. And the dog actually is the first one to sort of notice it. Eventually he hears it for himself and he pulls up. And he goes looking in the back of the truck. He notices that the temperature's gone down and he doesn't want to ruin the meat that's in there, so he goes in to have a look. And when he gets this great scene where he's walking through the back, and at the very back there's like these 2 extra bits of meat hanging up.
Yeah.
And he's like, I better count all this. So he gets the paperwork out of his pocket. And he starts counting all the carcasses to make sure. And I think, is it 200 or something carcasses? Because I was like, that's a lot of carcasses. But on second viewing, I noticed it looks like there was more carcasses hanging up higher as well, like it was 2 layers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because he was counting like 200 or something. I think it can't be just 200 on that one level. So I think it was like double layer.
I think you're right. Yeah, because there is when we get to the end, I think that would make more sense. There's something else above what we can see, that first level. Yeah.
So he counts all the pig carcasses, and there's an extra 2, I think he counts.
Mm-hmm.
And then he kind of sits in his truck and he's kind of like figuring out what's going on. And this is this whole scene where he starts losing it. He's sort of he's overtired. He starts seeing look at that stupid kangaroo jumps.
That was so strange. Like that extreme close-up of that fake kangaroo.
It is. Oh, I forgot. When we're back at the rest stop. He finally finds out what's in the esky.
Oh, that's right. It's just a sandwich and some fruit.
Nothing really. I think I was expecting to pull out like a heart or a lung or something. May said that's what she was expecting, to find a lung or a heart or something in there. But anyway, so there's nothing in there. So anyway, going back. Sorry, I went back, but anyway.
Oh, fine.
He has these hallucinations. He started having these hallucinations. The kangaroo one is so weird. It's oh my God! And he pulls up, and there's just like this little kangaroo on the road. And what else happens? There's that. And then he just starts talking to himself, and he's trying to explain away why he's got extra carcasses in the back.
And the way that shot is pretty cool too, because we see, he's talking to himself and Boswell, but also we're getting voiceover of what's going on in his head. So there's a lot of this where he's talking over himself, and he's trying to do all the math and trying to rationalize everything. And just the mania that communicates in that scene's really, really effective.
Police in Melbourne and Perth are seeking the assistance of motorists in connection with the disappearance of 20-year-old heiress Pamela Rushworth, daughter of U.S. diplomatic advisor Warren Rushworth. According to Mr. Rushworth, his daughter is traveling west with a truck driver, described in his mid-40s. Police have fears that the truck driver, whose name has not yet been released, may be the same man wanted in connection with the disappearance of a missing Melbourne girl. Authorities are denying any positive connection between the 2 missing girls and the series of macabre attacks on young female hitchhikers in Queensland and New South Wales, although they remind the public that hitchhiking is extremely dangerous and, of course, illegal. Allegations by a senior medical officer in Sydney today that drivers who operate vehicles under the influence of drugs are less culpable than drunk drivers.
Maniac. He cuts him up like a Sunday roast, and the cops are out looking for me. They got nothing on me. Nothing. I'm not worried. I can prove it. Well, autopsy, handwriting expert, dispatcher, I was on the road that night. Hitch. Oh, what was her name? Pamela. I think it was Pamela. Jesus, I hope they didn't see her in the dog box. No. Cops couldn't have seen her. What am I going to do with this truck?
And the confusion, right?
Right, yeah.
Apparently that was all Stacy Keach's idea. He was talking to Franklin about it when they were doing ADR. And he said, why don't we ADR some lines that will fit in with this, so he's having thoughts in his head, but then he's also talking as well. So that's where they did that as well. Yeah, so that's a great scene.
Yeah.
And it shows his confusion and he doesn't understand, or he's trying to explain it away. You know how sometimes something bad's happening, but you just try and explain it away so you don't have to deal with it.
Yeah.
So he's kind of doing that. Ooh,
Sorry,
sounds like a good motorbike.
It must have been Sneezy Rider.
It was. It was. Yeah. Like I said, he's rationalizing it. So he's like, oh, whatever his name is back at the meat plant, he looks after these other guys, so he always puts a couple extra in, or, you know, they miscounted or he miscounted. And so we're made to believe that one of those things there was a body, or two of them were bodies.
Right.
Yeah. And then we finally get the scene where he's driving into Perth and says Perth 40. And I'm like, 40 kilometres out of Perth would be, even though it's Perth, it would be a little bit more built up around him, like in the area around him. He's still kind of looks like he's kind of in the outback sort of thing. But you've got that whole scene driving into Perth, and there's this great bits where he's just driving in. There's the tail light reflection that goes up into his eyes, which I think is a great shot.
That's cool, yeah.
It's so cool. And then the bits where he sees the eyes on the back of the van as he's following the van, which almost makes me think of Patrick as well, because of those eyes. And then, of course, he has to stop at the weighbridge.
Right.
But at the same time, the van runs out of petrol. And we get this great scene where he's getting his truck weighed, and the guy that's weighing his truck basically says you're 70 kilos over or 40 kilos over, which gives more credence to the whole thing. Well, actually, you've got it's about the weight of a female body, or once it's been stripped down, you know.
Right, yeah.
So there's extra weight in the back. So you think, oh, okay, he's got extra weight. So those things actually did get put there after he left. The van runs out of petrol. We get this shot of the police helping the killer push his car to the service station, which I think is fantastic.
I do like that Quid is just watching all this happen. Like he's really more concerned about pacifying, what's his name, Lester, the guy at the weighbridge, who seems like a really nice guy. He's offering him coffee and advice, and hey, let's just chit chat for a minute. And I mean, Quid's patience are starting to run thin. He's like, I gotta go. I'll take a rain check on the coffee. I gotta get after this guy in the van.
And he follows him into the city, and we have this really, I don't know what to think of this, like, last sequence. Like, it's a chase, yes, and I understand from the commentary that they wanted the idea to be, they always wanted a chase where it was a slow chase rather than a rip-roaring, racing through the city. Also, there was budget issues, so they had to effectively stop filming. They had 2 more nights of filming they could have done after this to finish off this whole final piece. So apparently, you know how there's a bit at the end, and I'm jumping ahead, but I'm doing it for a reason. There's a bit at the end where everyone's standing around, and all of a sudden we see, Sneezy Rider, and we see the family, and we see everyone. And we see Captain, what's his name? Captain Careful.
Captain Careful.
and all this sort of stuff. There was supposed to be whole sequences in there during a chase where Sneezy Rider and what's the woman's name again? Forgotten her name. Frita. She's on the back of the bike, and they're supposed to slide off the bike and go under the truck while it's going through in the chase. That's supposed to happen. The guy with the boat has a new boat, and his boat gets crashed into again. Right, that's supposed to happen, but they had it all ready to film. They had the boat and everything, but at the last minute they said, no, you can't film anymore, you got to stop now. So they had to finish where it was, and that's why all those people are at the end, and you kind of go, why are all these people here that we saw? It's almost like a curtain call for them.
It is. It reminded me of like the Wizard of Oz or something, because it's like, and you were there, and you were there.
Yes.
And they all showed up at the worst time possible.
At the worst time. Exactly. So they've got this chase, and he goes through all these weird places, and there's some funny little scenes. I like the humour where the guy taking his rubbish out drops his glasses. They don't get run over by the van. They don't get run over by the truck, but the cops run over his glasses.
Great gag.
It's a really good gag. And then there's a bit where the cop car gets caught under the back of the truck, and they're trying to reverse away. The other cop gets out, and he goes under the truck to try and clear room or something. I don't know what he's trying to do.
Yeah, it was a little confusing because Lester made the comment at the weighbridge earlier that there was a tangle of wires and stuff under the
boat.
Yeah, from the boat. And so it seemed like maybe the car might have been tangled in that. But again, like this scene was very dark and hard to make out what was happening.
Yeah, and it was obviously affected by them running out of time to film.
Right.
So we get the bit where all in one, and there's the like the bridge coming across in the laneway they're in. It's like a walk bridge, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And the truck's stuck on that, and he's just revving the truck up. And of course the bad guy, the villain, is still sitting there just looking at him. There's that whole bit where he walks up to the truck and he smashes the headlights.
Yeah. With
the shovel, and I'm like, why would you there? Why wouldn't you just try and get away? But anyway, whatever. I'd say he's just fed up with him following him. and there's all in one piece. The truck comes loose from the trailer. The police car comes loose from the trailer, but it's revving in reverse, so it goes flying backwards into this garage. The truck shoots off and somehow lands on top of the van. Somehow, and Jamie Lee Curtis is in that van, and then we have this whole piece where the two of them start fighting. So we have Stacey Keach's character Quid fighting the villain Smith or Jones, and he bashes his head into a grate, and I'm like, wow, it's really a lot of damage.
Yeah,
and then he gets a guitar string or whatever it is and starts to strangle him. I'm like, who would do that? But then I guess he's just like totally fed up, but he does it in front of a whole gaggle of people.
It's like a surprise party. It's like all the lights come up. And it's like surprise. and not only are they all there, but they're all saying, pointing to Quid, to the cops, he's crazy and he tried to kill me. That's the guy. And he's like, no, it's not me. But the cops, of course, they already have it in for him.
Yeah.
But fortunately, this is where Hitch is recovered from the van. She was in a sleeping bag for most of the movie. And she's able to point to Smith or Jones. That's the guy. It wasn't Quid.
Yeah.
And so you think that Quid's going to go away, but fortunately, the cops are like, they put a hand on the guy's shoulder and say, oh, well, you're not off the hook just yet. You know, where do you think you're going?
And then, so that's pretty much how he gets. Yeah, I thought the whole thing was odd. It was okay the way it sounded, just a bit slow, I thought, for a chase. I think that could have, maybe if all those other pieces were in there, it would have been a little bit more interesting, I think.
Yeah, you can tell that they were rushed to try to make this cohesive, make it into something that made sense for this last bit to make up for all the stuff that they weren't able to shoot.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's probably why the third act feels so messy and incoherent at times.
It does. And then we have an epilogue. So we have Hitch and Quid walking along the road, the middle of the road with a truck coming up behind them. Anyway, talking about what they're going to do in the future. It sounds like they're both going off together. So I don't know if that's romantically or they're just hanging out. And it sounds like they're both going to Queensland or something to just figure out what to do next. And they're just going to do whatever comes up. He's there with his mandolin and he's got the dog. The dog's with him, yeah. Mm-hmm. And her, and they're just walking along, and that's where it ends for them, right?
Yeah. But this is what was a little confusing for me. because the way that shot ends is they're about to hitch a ride with another rig that's come along. He comments to Hitch. He says, "I thought that was you hanging," or he said, "I thought you were hanging in the back of my truck." And the shot on her slows down, and we cut to a hand holding a meat cleaver, and bam, we're at a butcher and we're unloading and cleaning Quid's trailer. But just that moment where that scene ends, I wasn't really sure what that was trying to say. Like the way the shot slows down on her, like it almost makes you, the audience, suspicious of her in that moment.
A little bit. Yeah, I didn't feel it that way, but it has a weird feel. It does feel weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we cut to like the bit that was put on at the bequest of the producer, not the producers, the film company, Avco Embassy. They were like, "Oh, you can't just end it with them walking away." It's just so bad, right? That you can't just end a movie with a happy ending. We've got to have some sort of shock ending.
Sure.
So they have this other epilogue where the meat's all being carved up, and we're supposed to think, maybe there's some human meat in there because it's all come out of the back of the truck. And then we get the final shot with the cleaning lady inside the truck cleaning the truck up after, all the meat's been removed, and this little guitar string hangs down. And she sort of brushes it away, and then she grabs it and pulls on it, and this head falls from up the top of the truck and into a bucket of water.
Like what was that? Like why? I was wondering why this was here. So I'm glad you clarified that this was kind of tacked on by the studio.
It was very fake looking head too.
It was.
He was like really not upset. Franklin was pretty cranky the fact that they asked him to do it. So yeah, they were like, "Oh, we've got to have a shock ending." I'm like, "Why? Why do you have to do that?" I mean, it would have been. I would have been okay with the meat going into the supermarket and getting cut up and the fade back from that.
Yeah,
that would have been totally fine.
That would actually be more effective because that's what really opens at least the bulk of the story. When we get the main title, it's over.
Yeah,
the rack of
the meat
And so I don't know. I mean, we could try to justify it by saying that it could be another thing that Smith or Jones did to implicate Quid in the murders by stashing that away in his trailer. But yeah,
I was always wondering why the truck was always just a manual lock. If you look at any rig that's carrying anything of any value, they always have locks and all sorts of things on those. There's no way you'd be tampered with. I even think back in those days they would have had locks and things like that on the back of the truck.
Yeah,
but it's a movie convenience, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
The woman cleaning the trailer out at the end was the mother of Patrick in Patrick, the movie before this, who was electrocuted in the bath. So.
Yeah,
you really need to see that movie.
I got to see it.
Movie.
I'm going to track it down. I'm going to make a note.
But yeah, so we have this weird ending, and I kind of, like I said, quite happy if they end on the meat being cut up, but the head was just a bridge too far for me.
Yeah.
So, and it was a very fake head.
Yeah, that was put together very quickly, you could tell.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So any final thoughts or any other thoughts on the movie?
Like as an exercise in suspense and love letter to Hitchcock, I think this succeeds. It's basically Rear Window in a truck, and like Quid is a great character. Stacy Keach does a wonderful job. Jamie Lee Curtis is pretty good here for what little she's in this movie. I really dug the cinematography. It's very creative. The pacing, for the most part, is all right for a 100-minute movie, but it also feels like the movie has more time than it knows what to do with, especially there towards the end. So like some of those beats feel a little monotonous, but I think that could work in the film's favor because, I mean, that's like the life of a truck driver, like having to amuse oneself in a job that's not very exciting. So I like that it kind of puts the audience in that mindset. But no, I thought this was a really cool, fun time. Like the meat workers strike thing, unanswered questions about the killer, that messy third act. I don't know how I feel about some of that, but I had a hell of a good time.
Yeah, I pretty much echo your thoughts. I think it's definitely Rear Window in a truck. And it goes back to, I think, if I remember, something else I heard was that when they were doing Patrick, that he gave Everett DeRoche the script to Rear Window as some sort of like sample of, the sort of writing he wanted to get into, or the sort of style. And Everett DeRoche said to him, wouldn't this be a great movie if it was in another setting like Rear Window? And that's where the whole idea for the movie came from, was from Rear Window. So it's pretty unabashed that it's effectively Rear Window in a truck. Cinematography, I actually didn't talk about that much. I also love the cinematography. It really shows the desolation of some of these places and how far away from everything they are. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you, I think the third act is lets it down a bit. The first act is really strong. The whole build up is really good. Once Curtis gets abducted, I think it sort of falls away a little bit.
Yeah, and maybe it wouldn't be that noticeable if that first act wasn't so strong.
Yeah, because the first act is really strong, and it sets it up really well. But I think obviously budget and time, I think, were the biggest issues they had, especially at the ending. He sounded like he was quite disappointed he didn't get the ending that he wanted to shoot, and they had to sort of make do with what they had. So yeah, good movie though. I enjoyed it. Good to watch. I'll watch it again for sure. All right, Brandon, so what is happening in your part of the world in regards to podcasts? And
well, let's see. Over on Varicon Video, we're starting a new themed series on imposters and doppelgangers. Yeah, so we'll be releasing an episode on Gattaca very soon. And then over on the Gory Picture Show, Lewis and I will be talking about Slugs.
Oh, that's a great movie. Have you watched it yet?
We haven't. No, we haven't seen it yet, but we just ordered it, and I just saw like a still from it on Instagram, and there was a note about it being banned, and I think in Australia for a long time.
Probably, I don't know.
And as most movies seem to be, but I was like, yeah, this looks like it could be a Gory Picture Show movie, because we were going to do like Dolly Dearest or something, and we were like, we're not going to be able to have a lot to say about this, so let's do something really out there. So yeah, so we're gonna
Slugs is crazy.
Yeah, so we're excited to talk about Slugs. So that's what's going on in our part of the podcasting world.
Well, that's awesome. So you've been really busy with that.
Yeah,
great to have you back. I'll definitely do it again, because we already have some plans for doing it again. We've spoke about, so that'll be really cool. And thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. I had a great time and looking forward to coming back.
And when we return, we're going to find out what's next.
And now, preview time. When it comes to entertainment, you can't beat a good film. So let's take a look at what's coming your way.
You loved him in E.T. Now Henry Thomas is back as Cody Walpole.
There's no brakes! He made it! There's no brakes! No!
Cody is an adventurer about to discover the secret of frog dreaming.
Guys, what do you know about a pond 5 miles east of Devil's Knob?
I want you to promise me you'll stay away from that pond.
Do you believe in monsters?
Son, for 20 years, I was married to one.
First you dance with the devil. Then you find out about Donkey.
Cody, just hang on. This is going too far. That thing could be 1,000 feet deep, if there's a bottom at all.
I reckon I got about 3 minutes worth of air down there.
Henry Thomas from E.T. is Cody Walpole, whose search for adventure takes you to the depths of a legend, the legend of frog dreaming.
Next on A Dingo Ate My Movie, Brandon is back with us to talk about Brian Trenchard Smith's family-friendly Frog Dreaming from 1986. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this episode. Thank you to all my guests who give their time to make this podcast possible, and a special thanks to you for listening. Don't forget you can follow A Dingo Ate My Movie on social media. We're at Dingo Movie on Twitter, Dingo Movie Pod on Facebook and on Instagram, and we're on the web at dingomoviepod.com. If you'd like to support the show, head on over to Patreon and sign up for early episodes, bonus episodes, and other goodies. Check us out there at patreon.com/dingomoviepod. And finally, I'd love to hear your feedback, so please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or drop me a line at pete@dingomoviepod.com. I take your feedback seriously, and it helps me to improve the show for you and all our other listeners. Once again, thanks for listening, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next episode of A Dingo Ate My Movie.
That man, he tried to push me off a cliff. I was standing on the side.
He trapped me in a toilet.
He had me trapped in a bloody shouting obscenities.
Wait a minute,